Ba-da-ba-ba-bum. Do. We need a theme tune. Do. Good evening. Welcome to the Accidental Journalist Live and Undrugged episode 14. I am with mediator Jason Edwards for part 2. We're going to talk about conflict. Tonight's episode, as always, is sponsored by Armour Scaffolding. For the best quotes, call Armour Scaffolding on 077 88 110 210 and No Means City Clothing for all your t-shirt and hoodie needs. I will drop the links below. Oh, mate, thanks for coming on.
Jack, as I was just saying earlier on, mate, it's a real pleasure. It's a real honour to be asked back for part 2. I'm in plenty of good company, so thank you very much, mate. It's lovely to be back on here again.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, mate. It's always nice to have you on. We always get some positive feedback when you come on, and because people love your wisdom. So yeah, we're going to talk about conflicts tonight. Is that right?
Yeah, we touched upon last time I was here. We were talking about some of the work that I've been involved in over the years, and I thought, why don't we get down into the weeds, or as you put into the etymology of it a little bit, about what is conflict, how does it arise, and also how do we resolve it? But as ever, Jack, we're not going to do this on some deep psychological, sociological level and talk about things that people that don't understand. We're just going to talk about blokes like you and me that have known conflict. We've known a world of conflict, and we've known a world of actually finding peaceful resolutions as well. So I'll be also as interested as ever about some of your experiences as well, because I know that that's a world that you've been around.
Yeah, I think for people from my sort of background, and especially in addiction, conflict is, especially, for the addict, I think conflict is that sort of make or break for some addicts. I know myself that I've relapsed on minor conflicts because I've not known how to deal with them in my own head. So,
and that is where conflict begins and ends. It's in the head. I was talking to someone today about, the work that I do now, what you might want to call bread and butter, is conflict resolution, day in, day out. And there's a practical level where we can resolve a conflict by doing things. I will not agree to do this anymore. You will not agree to do that anymore. And it's a bit of a negotiation, and it sort of works. And you'll sometimes build a bit of an uneasy alliance. But real conflict resolution is about looking at examining your beliefs and looking at the beliefs of the other person. Because the majority of the time, a conflict will arise with two separate entities with two opposing beliefs. People, even if it's just noisy neighbors with having music on, having parties, one will hold a belief system that this is fine, we're not doing anything wrong. The other person will hold a belief system that that's really bad, you shouldn't be doing it. But what you'll always find is you'll get all this stuff on the surface, like the noise and the throwing things and the insults and the abuse. But if you swim a lot deeper, which is where I have to go and live these days, there's always something bubbling on under the surface. And a lot of the time, it's all the really unpleasant things in life. It's sometimes it's race. Sometimes it's greed. Sometimes it's a lack of understanding of culture. And sometimes you can go even deeper. And this is about what you and I will really understand. It's about that actual personal belief system that someone holds around themselves and who they are and what their capabilities are and what they think the capabilities of the other person is. So you can with conflict resolution, you can start off here and you can get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And sometimes it's almost like a bit of therapy. One of the most remarkable things I ever resolved in an evening was a man who had his neighbor around the throat and was going to kill him. And he was a vet. He wasn't suffering any PTSD. He just had a lapse where he responded really badly to what his neighbor had done and was capable of killing him, like snapping his neck. And his first words to me when I walked in were, "This isn't going to work. This isn't going to change anything." And I think we had a 90-minute conversation where we just explored and spoke about him, who he was, what his life choices were, what he could do now, just asking all these really interesting questions. And he came away and he went, "I feel so much better." He went, "That was pretty good, actually, wasn't it?" Although it's 90 minutes of therapy. It's 90 minutes of therapy sometimes. And sometimes, a lot of the time, Jack, what we need to do to resolve a conflict is to just listen to someone and allow them to let go. Because people are holding on to anger, holding on to aggression. They don't really hate their neighbor, they don't hate their fellow man. But there's things that people have done that have annoyed them, and now they're holding on to anger about it. And you'll find out that the people previously were good friends.
That's the biggest one for me, really, though, because you know, in my experience, conflict has always been like an iceberg.
Yeah.
And you know what's on the top is what's on the top, and that's only a small bit of what it is. It's usually, you know, the thing that's pissing you off the most. But the thing at the bottom, most of it is underneath. And that's the bit that sunk the Titanic. That's the bit that does the most damage. And you know, I've been in so many conflicts with people where it could have been dealt with, but it wasn't about what they thought it was. It was about something that was deeper within me. So you know, it was usually like picking up, like using and relapsing and stuff like that. You know, I use it in relapse prevention, that the thing that you convince yourself that you're relapsed on is only that tip. You know, it's the deeper things underneath. And if we don't tackle those deeper things, that top thing, it's just, you know, it's inadmissible. You know, it's admissible. It doesn't matter. But if you don't deal with what's down here, it's not going to matter what's up here, because down here is going to do the most damage in the long term.
And it's having that time, and it's having that skilled person to drill down into it. It always makes me smile. A lot of the people I work alongside, whether it's local government, whether it's housing, whether it's the police, they'll always go, "How'd you sort that out then? How'd you do that one?" You know, these guys have been at it for months. And a lot of the time it's, I wouldn't even say, Jack, it's being a skilled listener. It's just being a listener. And all I do, and I've said this, and I've probably said it last time, but it's worth mentioning again. If you want to resolve a conflict, I spend 80% of my time just listening. That's all I do. I listen, I build rapport with someone, I get to know them, I'll be honest, people, I turn up to these situations, I'm more interested in talking to someone about their dog
Mm.
or what they do for a living or what's on their video collection.
Mm.
And then I just ask questions. It is as simple as
Yeah.
that. And you get to know someone and you suddenly realize this person who you've had not painted or characterized in a certain way has got such depth and such interest to them and has got this complete background. And you get them talking on, and then you find out what the important values are in life.
Yeah.
And then you're pretty much in with, oh, come on, my favorite question. Game of Thrones. Tyrion Lannister survives every major incursion in that movie. He's the smallest, he is the weakest character, but every time he encounters someone, he says to them, "What do you want?" That's all I ask people. What do you want?
Mm.
Come on, what do you actually do? And I guarantee you 10 times out of 10, they won't say, "Oh, do you know what? I want a bit more aggression, mate, a bit more conflict." They want it to go away. And nobody asks that question the right way. You know, they'll, what's the problem? What, you know, and it's all about focus. I did a session this afternoon with a guy and we were talking about OCD. And we did a session the other week and he said, "You know what? I think my OCD's gone in one session with talking to you." And he went, "But we didn't even talk about it." And I went, "No, you don't need to talk about it. You talk about how you develop a strong mind." So if I can get someone and throw the engines in reverse, although it's okay, we talk about, you know, the problem is there and we acknowledge that and we accept that, it's drawing the line under it. How are you going to throw the engines in reverse? How are you going to start being in future? What do you want to do now? And that is difficult, Jack, for a lot of people. And you will have known, you will encounter people in your life who just cannot draw that line under things and start again. They'll have that blood feud.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was discussing with James Jeffries the other week. You know, I know a lot of people who have been listeners in prisons, you know, while being a prisoner themselves, they've been listeners. And most of the conflict between them and other prisoners, it isn't like because you've gone, you know, you've done something a bit daft. It's through fear.
Yeah.
90% of the time, 95% of the time, even more, it's through fear.
Yeah.
And that's when we do the stupidest things. You know, and that's when in fear, that's when the aggression rises, because it's that fight or flight.
Yeah.
And for lots of people that are in prison, you can't fight. You're in the same fucking place. So it's fight or fight. So, you know, then you have to elevate yourself above their aggression, and then they have to elevate, you know, and it's a pissing competition. And it's just no good. It's no good at all.
You said the magic word, mate. And I've been talking a lot about this recently. I'm writing a lot about this. Fear is pretty much our main driver in life. It's a horrible thing to acknowledge, but we've got, I think the word of Tony Robbins, the life coach, two sovereign masters, pleasure and pain. And we move towards pleasure and away from pain, or perceived pleasure, and we move away from perceived pain, but it's driven by fear. Do you know what the number one fear I've got with people at the moment who I'm helping to resolve their problems? Summer's coming up and it's going to get worse. About 3 people have said to me this week, it's going to get worse when the warm weather breaks out. And I know it's going to get worse. No, you don't know it's going to get worse, but you're scared it's going to get worse. You're fearful. So you want to ramp things up and ensure that, you know, someone's putting a finger on your neighbor or your hated enemy to make sure it doesn't get any worse. And our fears always live out here, kind of in front of us. It's all the images that we project of things that have yet to or will never happen. That's the thing about a fear. They never get here. We just make an image, we have a sound, and we're fearful of it. And then, like you say, you then try and elevate yourself to the next level. So the thing I'm always saying to people is, we've got to broker reality. When people are talking about their fears and they're projecting all their fears onto me, or projecting their fears onto someone who's done something, what's actually going to happen? How do you know that? Well, I just do. You can't just know it because it hasn't happened, and it might not happen yet. And that's another thing that it's like a lot of the time, without straying too much into any one particular area, a lot of people will go to war and they will base their actions on their fear-driven beliefs. Like this is these people are going to come and do this, so we'll get in first and do that. And the whole Cold War now, when we look back and examine that, a lot of the time that was real fear-driven. We were told these guys were coming to bomb us, and there's going to be terrible conflict. Never happened.
No,
never happened.
It's all preemptive.
Yeah. So I think you've hit the nail bang on the head. Is I always ask people, like, what are you scared of? What are you actually scared of is going to happen? And I think people will say, I'm scared I'm not going to get a good night's sleep. I'm scared my neighbors are going to keep me awake. And then that starts, then people get hyper vigilant, and they start listening out for the slightest little sound, the slightest little movement. And then before you know it, they're coming up here. And the number of people I actually talk to about realistic expectations of what you can actually do here. And I think it's just dragging people back to reality and dragging them back to reality. When I was speaking about narcissistic abuse and narcissism, saying the one thing that narcissists hate is being dragged into reality. You keep questioning them and they hate it. But it's also the same with conflict. You've got to get to the reality of the situation of what is going to happen and what isn't going to happen. When you do that, you're kind of on the right road a little bit. I thought you were reaching for something there, Jack.
No, sorry, I've put my cup down. I can't put it in front of me. Screen.
He's going to bring out something really important and relevant to the conversation. You come up with an empty hand.
No, sorry. No, I agree. That sort of, I think that to certain people, certain ways of life can be toxic. Certain beliefs can be toxic. So you look at me, who was very toxically masculine. I was brought up in an environment where men provide for women, you provide for your children. A man doesn't cry, a man doesn't do this, a man doesn't do that, a man does this, a man does this, a man does it. And then it's sort of learned behavior. And it's really difficult to unlearn that. Being a father to daughters, it's quite, I pick up on toxic masculinity now. Excuse me. And I think that's down to environment, it's down to thing, but we need to sort of unlearn that, and because that is a big contributing factor. If I was a man with enemies, and no normal man has a nemesis, and I had a nemesis. I had a person that I hated and they hated me. No, that's not normal to, no normal person has an arch nemesis. I'm not James Bond. But it was like, you're programmed to hate certain people. You're programmed to hate certain ways of life. You're programmed to react in a certain way. So, something that I don't talk about a lot is you know, the reason for my incarceration when I was younger. And it's because I was bullied all the way through school. I was beaten to a pulp. And when I realized that actually I could take a good kicking and hit back harder, that's when it clicked for me and it went a bit dark. So, you know, I had these sort of toxic beliefs on, well, no, you don't hit women. This is a fact, but I believed that if you saw somebody hitting a woman, you reacted a certain way, and that certain way resulted in me hurting somebody really badly.
Yeah.
And it's something that I carried on my shoulders for a long time. It's something that, you know, I lost it. And, you know, I hated myself for that. I hated myself for doing that amount of damage to a person.
But your
I hated
strategy used to
myself.
take over. Your strategy would kick in, because what you're telling me from a conflict point of view, from a conflict resolution point of view, is sadly, unfortunately, the worst thing for you was that aha light bulb moment was actually, do you know what? I'm getting a right old kick in here, but I can probably deal with that, and I can then dish it out twice as hard. It's probably the worst strategy that you could. I mean, it's great from a self-defense, like say, fight or flight point of view, but then the next time it happens, it's almost like that first cigarette's the worst one, and it hurts, but the second one, oh, it's not actually that bad. And then you start to look for that third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh cigarette, and it's almost like you went, "Well, you know what? This ain't that bad. I can deal with this," and you know, become your new strategy, become your new process, didn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, to a certain point, when I got sober this time, and I learned to deal with it in certain other ways, conflict now makes me feel really sick. It's like that first cigarette, that's fine. You could just about manage that. But then you have another cigarette not so long after that, that nicotine hits, and then you get the head rush, you get the stomach feeling, you know, and then you just want to lie on the floor feeling sick. It's that, you know, when there is actual genuine conflicts, I now shake. I can't sort of do that. And I think that's part of me reprogramming. Now I want to talk about it.
But you broke the state. You broke that state. It's like, go back a few years, Jack, and I know you're a retro guy by your videotapes. CDs, if you scratch them and then scratch them and then scratch them and then scratch them, eventually they wouldn't play. And that's what you've done with that old bit of programming. You scratched it enough times, you scratched it, and your old strategy doesn't work. And your new strategy to avoiding conflict is, and I love it, because it's always, you'll use that word brother, and you send me a message and you say, brother, how are you? And it's your internal dialogue changes. And I think a lot of the time when you've got intense conflict, it's drilling down into what is the internal communication. And I'm always trying to find out to people, what are you telling yourself? What are you saying? And it's a lot of the time people will be completely demonizing either a culture, a creed, a race, or just a neighbor or someone from a different postcode. That's a common one, isn't it? You know, they're from this postcode, they must be really bad. And it's that internal communication. But you changed it. You broke it, you broke it, you broke it, and now you've got something new. And I think a lot of the time it's that it's not always shaking hands with the enemy. It's shaking hands with you, shaking hands with yourself. It's finding a bit of internal peace, isn't it?
Yeah, I think because at times you can be your own worst enemy.
Oh,
you know,
bingo, mate.
the way that it's, you know, I've spoke about my mental illness many times. I've spoken about my, you know, my addiction, which I call my dragon. You know, it's my dragon. You know, I talk about it in the books. You know, it's how I deal with it, and that for me it was I used to externalize my response, whereas now, before I externalize, and you know, I'm not doing this, I internalize, and think about it, and think about actually what I've achieved over the past few years. I could lose that, so you know, that's a big motivator. But you know, it's just changing that one thing in that link.
Yeah.
You know, that's how viruses change. It's how computer viruses change, just by changing one thing in that link. You know, and I suppose it then goes from DNA to RNA. It's just like, you know, and then it becomes automatic response instead of having to think about it. So instead of doing this now, I do this. So my automatic response is to think and then bring it out and then try to talk about it.
You've just described what I do in every conflict with the people I talk to. Is I try and ask a question that is going to elicit a new thought. Yeah. How would it be if this was happening? You know, what do you think that they're experiencing? You know, how's this going to work? And I'm always saying to people, you never know what's going on for the other person. Because a lot of the time I'll have two people that have fallen into conflict and there'll be some horrendous things going on in the house, some, you know, of no fault of their own. You know, some people have bad luck, and and you just think, you poor devil, and you talk to them and you think, how are you even coping and keeping your world together? And from the outside world, it's like bedlam, 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 and people think, oh God, that shocking, awful, terrible group of people. And you get in there and you get to know them and you meet them and you realize, Jack, they're hanging on by their fingernails. And I'm always trying to say to people on the outside, you can't know what it's like to be them, but you need to try and install into someone a little bit of this. Do you know the first question we have to ask every single time in every conflict? Are they capable of showing and finding empathy for the other side? That's, if not, if you find someone has no empathy there, you've really got to try and actually also create it. That's like trying to harness, you know, base metals from gold, or you know, gold from base metals. And it's trying to ask that question and actually give someone a little bit of a golden thread to pull onto, to actually say, what's it like for the other person? You know, how is it for them? And we see so much intolerance going on in the world, and there's so much conflict that comes out of that. And I'm no bleeding heart liberal or anything, or any kind of do-gooder, but I just think that sometimes when you get to understand a different position, a different perspective, that you don't have to suddenly change who you are. You can still be the same, but you can start to let a few things go. You can start to let a few of the negative thoughts go that you're holding on to. Because a lot of the time when people fall into conflict, the conflict wasn't always there. And I'll take people back to, actually, there was a time when you guys were okay with each other. There was a time when you guys actually spoke, and they will always go, yeah, when I first met them, they lent me 20 quid when I really needed it. I was absolutely desperate. What happened? What happened? And it'll be one little thing, and that whole ideology will change, and they'll go off in their separate directions. And you're trying to bring them back to actually reminding them there was a time when things were pretty good, and you know, no one is truly evil, Jack.
No. I find that adults easier. I think it's easier now I've got brain damage, to be honest, because I don't really care as much as I did. Well, I do, but You know, I used to let it get me to a point where it used to give me a breakdown. But the thing I find difficult, and I know I'm not alone, and I know it's not easy to admit, but you know, I've got kids. I love them. There's a point where they push you so far, they raise their voice, I raise my voice, and then it gets into a shouting match, and then
Yeah.
nothing's getting done. And I don't think it's easy for any parent to
God,
admit
no.
that, but it does happen, because you know, I struggle, and I know that these kids are, you know, to a point unable to express what's bothering them. But when voices are raised, and you know, you get caught up in that, and then you get caught into a shouting match, and then it just elevates and elevates, and they're shouting, and you know, it's difficult. Do you have, you know, I'm sure I'm not alone, but do you have any sort of advice for people that are going through that? Because I know that
Absolutely, I do, my friend. I think you've hit upon one of the most difficult areas of dispute resolution at all. Yeah, you can talk about people having work conflicts, and there's rules for work. You can talk about people having business conflict with contracts, neighborhood issues, relationship problems, but family issues. Oh my good God. I've written a thesis on this, mate, because there's something, and I'll be the first to throw my hand up and say I have behaved less than admirably in social situations around my family and lost it as well. And it's almost, I'll tell you what it is, we have to be careful. It's because it's family, it's almost permissible. It's the first thing we have to think is, you know, oh, it's okay, it's family, you know, unconditional love. So you can just kind of do what you like. But you shouldn't take that approach because they are your family and you do spend more time with them. So I think first of all, that ideology that it's our family, so it doesn't matter, is actually the worst thing of all. It's our family, so it should matter more with how we communicate. What I'll always say, and it's, I think, particularly pertinent with children, is when they're firing things back at you, never, ever, ever use the Y word. Never. There's two words I won't allow in dispute resolution. One is why, because you can't answer a why question. So get them to ask you that question again. Get them to, you know, why can't I have that? Ask me it a different way. You know, what is it that you actually want? Okay, I can understand you. You know, like, why can't I have it? Okay. Get them to ask you the question in a different way. Teach them, educate them. And the other word I will never, ever allow, and you're a parent, Jack, and this one's going to do your head in. So I'm sorry, mate, because I'm about to actually pull back the curtain like the end of Wizard of Oz here. An artificial construct that does not exist, but we all use it in conflict. The word fair. There's no such thing, buddy. There's no such thing as fair. Whoever came up with, well, that's fair, isn't it? The only person that uses fair is the person who's telling you it's fair. Tell you what, Jack, if you give me 20 quid, I promise I'll go away. That's fair, mate, isn't it? Not if I haven't got 20 quid to give you. You have to be so careful of when people say, oh, that's a fair deal, buddy. That's a fair deal. Who? What, because you say so? I think you can literally have, like, if you cut an apple in half and give half to one and half to the other, you can go, that's a fair sort of, you know, like you've got an equal amount. But I think you have to be careful with the Y word, and you have to be careful. The F word, mate, never go into the word fair. It's it doesn't exist.
No, I mean, we get that all the time. You know, it's not fair. You know, and then you find yourself in this sort of philosophical debate about fairness, and it's like, well, you know, or you know, the automatic response would be, well, life ain't fair, you know. And it's just, how do you argue with that? It's you know, I think kids are more switched on than we give them credit for, and I think
I always go for changing the wording, mate. It's about asking better questions. Always asking better questions. People will often present to me, sometimes in, should we say, the heat of battle, their very emotional state, and they will present to me in a different way, and then they'll say to me, "What do you think? What do you think? That's terrible, isn't it?" And I'll always say to them, "That sounds awful. If that is your experience of the world, that must be awful." You've got to get a little bit of tactical empathy. Is I'll actually, without saying to someone, the one thing I never say is, "Oh, I know what that's like, mate. Oh, I know what that's like," because I don't know what things are like. It's be a lie. And if I said I knew what it was like, I'd be just lying through my teeth. And I've only got 2 rules: never promise, never lie. I'll say to someone, "Do you know, seems to me that's really upset you. Sounds to me like, oh, that's really pissing you off. That's really, really awful. What would be better? How could this work to you? Because you don't sound very happy with that at all." And you're almost trying to move the logical brain over. You're trying to get the emotion to go from there to the logical side. Because a lot of the times you can get people to rationalize their emotional state. You seem really upset. I am. Okay. What would be a better way of moving it? Always, you go into the emotions, but come out of them quick as you can. It's one of the best ways of defeating it. Breaking the state, bit of humor. I never forget, one night I was stood on a roof with a guy, and he was threatening to jump, and he had a razor blade at his wrist, and he said, if you go, I'll jump, and if you try and talk me out of it, I'll slip my wrist." I thought, brilliant. I thought, what can I do here? And I went, "Do you know what, mate? What would you do if you were me?" And do you know what he did? He laughed, and he went, he went, "You're a bit effed, aren't you, mate?" I went, "Yeah, I am a bit." I went, "I can't flip and win with you. Damned if I do, damned if I don't." And he laughed. He thought it was really funny. I went, "Well, you set me the ultimate dilemma." I went, "Even you can't resolve it." And then I got, the minute he laughed, the minute his state was broken, I went to him, "Oh, come on, mate, what do you want?" And he went, "Well, my telly's broken. I'd like to watch a bit of Game of Thrones." I went, "Christ, if that's all you're after, mate, I'll go out and I'll buy you a telly. You know, come on, we can resolve that one. I can get down to second-hand land and grab you one."
Yeah.
It's diffusing it. It's turning those emotions in a different direction. But like I say, never getting the Y word, never getting the F word, ever. Because you're right. Because if somebody says it's fair, we then start trying to, like you say, you'll have this deep philosophical question, and you might even bring God into it, Jack. I don't know. You might bring the whole history of creation, fairness, and you know, how did I end up here? And they're just after a bag of, you know, Maltesers or something.
Yeah. It happens with siblings, you know, and it's like, they're like, "Well, that's not fair," and then you're thinking, well, deep down you're thinking, well, life ain't fair. and then, but you've got to be like, well, you had one earlier, so you know, they can have one now. Yeah, but I want one now as well. Well, then you're debating fairness. If you had one earlier and they didn't, they get one now. You don't get one now. And then it goes back into that thing, and it's a sort of ever increasing circle.
There's an old story, and it was in a book by a guy called Bill Urey, who wrote a book called Getting to Yes. And it was a great little book about dispute resolution and how we resolve. And I read it problems, how we resolve it. Read it many years ago. Principled negotiation. He's come up with these 4 principles, and he starts off with a book, and he's on about the importance of listening. And he says there was a mom and her kids were fighting over an orange. And they were fighting, and she went, right, bang, cut the orange in half. That's fair. Right, you get half and you get half. And she watched them, and one kid went off and scooped out all the juice and all the flesh from the orange and ate that and threw the peel away. And the other child scooped out all the flesh, threw that away, and used the peel to make a cake. Now, if she'd have actually stopped to ask them, what do you want the orange for? Well, I want the inside. Well, I want the outside. You'd have both got a lot more out the deal. Sometimes it is literally about going into what the people's needs, what their requirements are. And it's a funny thing, because I was reading a book quite recently about a guy who had done some of the most difficult work you can ever get involved in as a professional. He was doing kidnap for ransom work. Now, hostage negotiation is one thing. You are looking to get someone to put a knife or a gun down, remove a barricade, and let an innocent person go. And when they come out, they know the police are waiting for them, and they're going to get nicked. Difficult task, I've got to be honest, and it takes a hell of a long time to get it right. But kidnap for ransom is a little bit different, because these guys know that there's no police involved, that they're going to get a payday, that it's going to happen, and all they've got to do, and it's a business, and you treat these people, controversial as it is to say, like business professionals, and you negotiate on a business level. But this guy was saying that they had a spate of this happening in a certain area of South America, and they realized that there was a certain gang who were grabbing people on a Wednesday or Monday or a Tuesday, putting the ransom up by Wednesday, but wanting it resolved for Friday. And he said, we kept thinking, what's going on here? What are these guys after? They keep grabbing people on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, but they want to pay out on Friday. And he said, in the end, they realized what they actually wanted was they just wanted some money to go partying with. He said it wasn't like some, Pablo Escobar or anything like that. It wasn't Die Hard or anything like this. These guys were literally grabbing people off the street so they had money for Friday. And he said, so we actually started to realize that we could get people back pretty swiftly and say to the family, look, don't worry, we'll probably have them by Friday night at 5 o'clock. But, and then start up with something like, we want 50,000. And they'd normally get them released for about 1,800. So it's finding out what people want. It is finding out what people want, and literally sometimes it's in an uneloquent way, almost meeting their needs. But when you drill down into that, it is so important. And again, it takes me back to my favorite question is, what do you want? And when you get that, your real bit of gold dust is when you actually start to say, what do you want me to say to the other side? What do you want to say? How do you want to communicate something to them? And if you get an apology, oh my Lord, you would be amazed, Jack. The feuds that have been going, that have caused horrendous emotional, physical, financial damage. One person will go, do you know what? I am actually sorry about that. And you're almost like you want to either get the phone down or race across the city and say, can I disclose that? Yeah, tell them. And the whole mantra changes of someone. And they go, look, they've actually they said they were wrong to do that. And actually they're sorry. And it's the smallest thing, Jack. It's the littlest thing And the minute you get that little golden thread, do you know what normally happens? Law of reciprocity. That other person will go, do you know what? I'm pretty sorry about some stuff I did as well.
Yeah.
And you start building then.
Yeah.
You really start shaking a little bit of hands with people. But it's all those layers, it's all those levels you have to actually get down and drill into. But you get that little golden thread, or just that one small thing. Somebody will just literally shift their position ever so slightly. But you've got to be so careful, because you were talking about, and I'm sorry if I'm going on a bit, but you were talking about toxic masculinity, and I wanted to come back to that. It's so difficult for some men to actually shift that position.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, women, you'll talk with women, and do you know what? They'll go, oh, do you know what? I've been there. Must be shocking to have all them kids and be on your own. Do you know what? I know they're trying their best. It's a hard old life. You get a bloke that can actually start to shift his position a little bit, start to expand his mind, and really grow and develop. You're there. You're going to start moving forwards, and it's lovely. You just watch it all start to come, and you get that little handshake. And people bury the hatchet. People end feuds. You know, it's a good thing when it happens, but it's a long time sometimes getting them there, buddy.
It is, and it's funny you should use the word reciprocity. You know, it's like a dance. It goes the other way. When you're in conflict with a child, and they're raising their voice because they can't, and then you're raising your voice. It is almost it's like a reciprocous dance, and it's trying to better. It's just kind of like a dance off, and it can get really difficult, because I think that you get caught in that loop, that behavior, that chain of thought, that and I think as an adult, that's really difficult to palate sometimes, because as a person who is sort of searching for to live a better life in a certain way, it gets difficult, because we don't like admitting that we're wrong, just like kids don't like admitting that they're wrong. Hang on, mate, 1 second. My boy's here for my coffee. We don't like admitting that we're wrong, and it's then often you then in that grapple arguing, because you're thinking, I'm not fucking adult here. I'm not going to let this little turd win. And then you just, you find yourself in that sort of, what am I doing?
We don't ask the good questions straight away, do we?
No.
You don't ask that better quality of question of yourself straight away.
No.
And you just go into battle mode. You just go into heated battle mode. And it's who we are. It's what we do. It's what we've had for decades and decades and decades. But it's when you keep that calm, focused mind that you can actually just do something different. And that's all we're looking for a lot of the time, is we're looking for people to do something different. For a long time now, and I haven't really, I've completed it, I've done it, I've put it up there. I've always had an idea ever since I first studied conflict resolution. I think even while I was actually studying it, I roughly sketched out a plan of something that I wanted to do. And it's been like God knows how many years in the making. But I've put a website up recently, and it's completely free of charge. I'm going to be honest, I stole my inspiration from Martin Lewis when he did his money saving website. I like that. I thought
Mm,
that's good. I went on there and I looked at it and I saved money and it didn't cost me nothing. And I thought that's a good website.
mm,
You know, the guy told me how to save cash and he took nothing from me. So I did a similar one. And it's you can go and have a look at it. It's called resolveanydispute.com. And I'll put a little link there later. If you've got any conflict in your life and in your world, and you think, I want to resolve this quickly and easily, and I don't want to actually spend any money on it. I just love the way you just go there and a hand comes back with coffee in it. That's amazing. It's like a magic trick.
it's having a 14-year-old, mate.
Go and have a look at resolveanydispute.com. I've put everything on there that I know. Everything I've ever done to resolve disputes, I've bunged it on there. I've got a whole page that's just literally about where to start, what to do, how to resolve it. There's a family page. There's a neighborhood dispute page. There's a business page. There's a work page, because a lot of the time we get conflict at work and we really feel like we're on the back foot because we're not sort of been met. There's information on there about if you do have conflict with your neighbors. Now that's massive at the moment. You know, always remember there's always steps you can go to. You know, there's good companies you can go. You know, the police can put you in touch with mediators. The local council can put you in touch with mediators, and it's all free. Don't think you've got to pay for this. If you're in a dispute with a neighbor and it's going a bit wrong, because I've had people, I've phoned them up and they said, "What's the cost, mate?" And I've gone, "No, it's all paid for, buddy. Taxpayers' money." But what else I did, Jack? I had a little bit of a moment in my life where I reflected on something, and a friend pointed something out to me. I went through a breakup and I went through a divorce. And the first long-term breakup I went through, I managed to, with my ex-partner, resolve it for 125 quid. And a friend of mine, Lee, went, "That's a book, mate." He went, "You should write that as a book." So I did take a lot of information. It's not a lot. I've churned out a new book.
Back in.
And it's a book that saves you cash. If you're going through a divorce, if you're going through a separation, and we've been humming and hawing, and there's been yays and nays and all sorts about the title. It's not. It is one of those books that it will literally just save you thousands on your divorce or save you thousands on your separation. But I called it Letting Go Gently, because there's a little story at the beginning that personally happened to me. And you can actually, I think if you go online on Amazon, you can read the first bit for nothing, and it'll tell you this little bit of story about something that I learned about letting go gently. When we let go gently, particularly if you've been in a really horrendous relationship, if you've had a bad relationship with someone and you need to separate from them, if you can let go gently, if you can still find a way to talk to them, and I know that sounds like, you're kidding me, mate. You learn the art of doing everything still one-to-one, and you save thousands. We're coming out of lockdown, and it's an awful thing to actually write a book about. I never go for anything nice. I know that. There's a lot of people have gone through lockdown and thought, this is not the person I want to be with. And I'm going to split up now, and I'm going to separate from them. But a lot of us do not have thousands and thousands of pounds to deal with a massive divorce. And there's cheaper options, there's easier ways. And I've had a couple of people that have come to me and they've said, "You know what, I've started going through this book, and it doesn't have to be that way. It can be a lot easier to actually just separate on a more even keel." And the secret, the beauty of it is when you're doing that, when you're talking, you're not paying a solicitor, because a lot of the time solicitors will just charge you to talk to each other. Yeah, you know, every time you send a letter or a phone call, what I say is have a little look at this and do that. And like I say, I think for the download it's $4.99 or something like that. So if it's a little bit of an impassioned plea to people, If you've not got a lot of cash, like a lot of us don't, and you have come out of a bad situation or a bad relationship and you've got to sever the ties, consider just having a look at my website. There's loads of information on there. It tells you how to resolve these things. Have a look at the book. It's $4.99 on download, $9.99 paperback. Save yourself a lot of trouble before you start calling a solicitor. We're heading for the summer. Summers are always high time for people to fall into conflict because we're all going to be outdoors again.
Yeah, that as well.
Yeah, plenty of that as well. And what I always say is just start now. If you can start building bridges before things get bad, because we've all been, you know, kind of closeted away for a year, and that's been difficult.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's been indoors for a year.
Yeah,
pretty much, apart from having to go to appointments and that. She's been indoors for a year, you know, and that's pretty hard on anybody, you know. I've been able to get out. I've been able to get out and go into town and do things that I need to do. The first lockdown I found really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I found myself just sat there watching 80s films on my computer. The second lockdown, I convinced myself I was going to do something. And that's when Shed X was born. I know that was towards the end of the year, but, you know, that's when I'd sort of got myself into that frame of mind. And, you know, it's coming out of that, but it's not easy for anybody, let alone those that may have sort of mental illnesses, you know, or anything like, you know, OCD or bipolar or anything, you know, on the mental illness scale. It's difficult for normal people. So, you know, and there's going to be that. I think we almost, I know I go off a bit sometimes, I do apologize for that, but I think we almost kid ourselves into it's the British thing to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a bit of tyranny with the government. We feel that we've lost some liberty, or even in arguments or whatever, we feel one of us will always feel like we've, you know, lost a bit of liberty or whatever, right? So then we'll go and we'll drink it away, and then drink or whatever then heightens just senses, and then it becomes sort of hyperbolic, and then you just end up on that collision course. Yeah. And that, you know, so I can see why someone would be, you know, high with conflicts. And with this, you know, I've had to just walk away from certain conflicts out on the street because people have been like, "You're too close," or you know, just get away. You know, I had one guy at the start of the, you know, at the start of the pandemic. He was, you know, delivering a parcel. I opened the door. We've got a mat in front of our door on the inside. It's kind of, you know, where you wipe your feet, and then you've got normal carpet, and then you've got a bit of metal to hold that down. So I stood behind the metal. So I was a good, 2.5, 3 meters away from him. But still, I opened the door to get back. You know, that's fair. I understand that. But, you know, it's just, the whole pandemic is just.
Jack, the first time I had to queue up to get into a supermarket, a guy turned around, he went to me, "You're way too close." And I actually looked down and I thought, you know what? I said to him, "You're right, buddy, I am." I went, "This is going to take a bit of getting used to, isn't it, mate?" I went, "I am way too close." I went, "You couldn't be more right." And I thought he didn't have anywhere to go with it.
Mm.
I've just sold her. Just absolutely, mate. I'm way too close. I'll have a step back. It's what I've done it. I've been in supermarkets. I've been reaching for something, and somebody's gone. That's close. Shit, I've gone. It is, isn't it? I said, I'm sorry about that. I forgot. I'll bring it right in the room and look at it. And I think I think sometimes it's that way of resolving conflict really quickly, rather than actually having a dig back. Going, oh, I couldn't help it. I did, didn't I? It was a bit of a cock up, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You mentioned mental health, Jack, and as ever, you know, it's a real serious passion of mine. I worked in mental health. I was fortunate enough to have a great position working in mental health for 10 years. And I will be honest with you, a lot of the conflicts that I'm helping people to resolve now, you've most of the time got one or at least two parties who are suffering with some sort of mental health issue. I think if I had a message, it's just be mindful of what other people are going through. Be mindful of what other people are suffering. And I know, and it is hard. A lady said something to me one day, and it was so profound, and I've always remembered it, and I quote it. And it's not a brilliant, lovely, excellent message that resolves all, but it does let you know their neighbor was suffering with some real issues, some real enduring mental health problems. And I actually, you know, she actually wanted her neighbor to know that and disclose that to her, so she knows what she was going through. And she said, thank you for telling me that. She said, that's really valuable, and I do feel sorry for her. And she went, and I can see she's having all these problems, but they are still impacting on my world. I thought that's the difficult thing. Sometimes you can, and she said, I can have so much empathy and so much compassion. And she went, I've been through what she's been through, and I know how hard it is, but I still can't sleep at night. And I know, and it's hard, isn't it? Sometimes we'll know and we'll understand, and somebody's behavior is not great, and you just think they can't help that, but it still impacts on your world. And that's the difficult bit, where you've really got to then go back to the surface level, which we're going to square the circle here, Jack. And what are the practical things that you can actually do? Because they'll always come down to that. You know, the practicalities of living in this world next to people, being in conflict with people. Sometimes you just have to do something different. You just have to change your behaviors sometimes. You know, wear a mask when you go out in public.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. There is something I wanted to touch on.
Please.
Facebook, social media.
Yep.
And you have this, oh, well, if you don't like this, blah, 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 scroll on by.
Yeah.
We know that's not always that easy, especially when it's something that impacts upon your life, as you say.
Yeah.
You know, I have noticed the toxicity that always has been really around Facebook, and it's caused me some you know, it's aggravated my mental health at times in the past. You know, when I've vented on Facebook, and then that's caused arguments and stuff like that, and you think, well, I really shouldn't have said it, but actually it's my feed, so you know, and then you get proud, it's like my feed, so I should be able to say it. And then you know, you get the people where you know, you get the outward racism, you get the inward racism, you get the, you know, all these things, and all that, you know, people post all these things, and there's some horrific posts that go about, and it does affect people in such a profound way. And for me, Facebook has been, you know, I use Facebook for this. I use it to promote stuff for people, promote stuff for myself. You know, it's a great business tool. You know, and for those who use it just to keep in touch with each other, that must be nice. But you know, it is a breeding ground for toxic behavior. and conflict and conflict. You know, and you can't help but sometimes get dragged into them. A couple of years ago, I was involved with a Facebook group, and there was a guy. No, I'm going to say it. There was a guy called Steve Davis, and he found his way into all these crime groups and you know, other groups, and he got himself into films, and you know, I'm not talking about like student films. I'm talking about big, British films, big British films by big producers. And he turned out to be a human trafficker. That affected friendships that I had with people online, but that it also impacted in me because, you know, me being me, I was trying to help promote him and trying to help promote other people. And then, you know, obviously this all happens and then you get hurt. And you know, all this conflict went about, and it was sort of arguments going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And there's no winner.
No.
You know, there's no winner. And all it's doing is really hurting people. And I mean, this guy really hurt a lot of people. He'd managed to put himself into personal relationships, you know, friendships with some higher profile people on Facebook. So some of the, you know, known faces. And that sort of, it caused a massive storm and a massive conflict. And you can say all you want about trying to let go. You know, I work a 12-step program. A big one for me is let go, let God. But it's not that easy because it's just a breeding ground of toxicity. How can we deal with that better? Because we can't always scroll on by. We've all got personal opinion. You know, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. You know, it's how do we use Facebook for a more positive instead of the conflicts?
The other day, I read this will lead back to your answer, I promise you. The other day, I was flicking and scrolling through Facebook. A reporter put a post up, and it said, watching the James Bond films in order is a lot more complex than you think. I thought, really, is it? I thought, I'm a massive fan of the Bond films. I thought, right, this is, whoa, I thought I'm going to learn something here. Like, it's going to be like the Star Wars movies or the Marvel films. I've been watching them out of sequence all along. And I kind of went through, and all they'd done was just listed the films as they came out. And I actually said, I don't normally ever make negative comments. But the sheer pointlessness of this article basically says, watch the films as they were released. I went, what? And a lot of people went, yeah, do you know what, mate? And then somebody actually pointed out, and I did have to say, fair point, that I think one of the movies, it changed like the order that you should watch it. It was buried in there. And I was like, okay, all right, so maybe I missed that point. And you're right, Jack. Sometimes it's hard. I mean, that was nothing. That was just amusing. That this guy and this was a paid article. This was a known in his field writer, and it just amused me that he'd just written the films down in order, bar one. Sometimes, Jack, it is the better person that you say scrolls on by. When Will Urey wrote this book, Getting to Yes, he put in there the most unused button on email is the one we have to use more. We fire off and we read something and we type away like that. And he went, there's a brilliant button. It's called save to draft. If we used save to draft a bit more, step back, got out the emotional state, and then thought, he calls it going to the balcony. Take a step out on the balcony. What happens to you? What happened to me? And it's a stupid thing. And I thought, what a daft thing to actually type and report on. It was just funny in the end. Was if I'd have actually have thought, do you know what? Do I really need to type that as a flipping conflict resolution specialist? Probably not. It might have even created some conflict somewhere. I didn't stop and think. And actually, Jack, we have got what it takes to scroll on by. And if more of us did that, it would be better. And I'll tell you why. And I will tell you why, my good friend. If somebody comes up to you and they are going to cause an argument and they're in your face, they're up there, and you know what that world's like, and you know how you've responded to it in the past. You don't have a mute button in real life. As that woman that was in the council meeting, that Jackie, whatever her name was, I thought, oh, well, no, they should have dealt with that if it had actually been real life and not had a mute button. If somebody gets up in your face and they are yelling and shouting at you and you don't respond, you're not having an argument. All you've got is just one moron shouting and another person not responding. And a lot of the time, that's what social media is. When you get these negative posts, you've just got one person going, "Rah!" It only works if somebody puts out this hostile post like "Rah!" and no one even responds to it. It just goes off into the ether. I don't know, it's a bit hippy-dippy-ish and whatever, but if nobody responds to these people, and I'm not saying people should just be allowed to say what they like, but it takes two people to have an argument. You can give a clear, logical, and I've done that. People have, you can give a clear, logical perspective on what you're doing, but you've got to be aware, Jack. First book I wrote, Monsters Live Amongst Us, the drama triangle, the narcissistic drama triangle. If you don't go to the table, you don't have to play the game. When you got involved in a situation with someone who you did a lot of good for, and you were like feeling really good, and then suddenly it's like boom, it just elicits the emotions. It elicits all those negative emotions that you have been really great at keeping down. And I don't know, and you might have got an absolute firestorm of negativity come at you out of something that you did in all innocence. But it's only an argument if two people are going like that. If not, it's just one person. My response, and I've been really fortunate over the years. I've never understood how I've bloody got away with it. Either I'm not as successful as I think, or nobody reads my posts, or I'm just lucky. I've had hardly any trolls. I've hardly had, and I'm not asking for one. I've hardly had any negative. I've had the odd person who has sent me personal. I've had a personalized attack that I reported. I've had the odd stupid comments, or I think my resolve any dispute one. Somebody went, yeah, how can we resolve having anyone put idiotic posts like this up? And I never ever respond. I never ever comment, and I literally just delete them. But I've seen other people respond on my behalf. I spelled something incorrectly once, and I didn't realize it. And somebody else corrected my spelling, and I went, oh my god, thank you so much. I went, I did not know, and it was a word that was really important to my website. I'd spelled incorrectly. I went, I am so thankful. But other people piled in and went, oh, haven't you ever heard of compassion? Haven't you ever heard of caring? And I was like, there's no need for that. I've gone, look, do you know what, cheers, I don't know how you meant it, but I'll take the message. And I was like, my spelling's bloody atrocious.
Mm.
So I don't get lots of that. I get the occasional one, but I don't ever respond. It's what you do to narcissists. It's the old grey rock trick. If they keep trying, and I've had some people have like really tried to push me and goad me, and somebody sent an absolutely vile thing that they put on my personalized site, but I didn't respond to it. And you don't give them the credence, you don't give them the value, and you don't give them your airtime. You do something brilliant and really positive these days. That's where you put your focus, and that's where you put your efforts, in your family, you put it in your faith, and you put it in all of the positive work that you do. That's how you maybe make the world of social media a bit better. And just scroll, it is scroll on by, sorry, it's it's one of those awful adverts where it's one of those awful things where people say, I don't have to eat kale, do I? Yeah, sorry, actually it's eating kale, you know.
Yeah.
Fruit and vegetables are healthy, Jack, and McDonald's probably could do with, like, you know, something you shouldn't eat every day. And
well, I'm not 16 stone far for a reason. You know, I fell into that the other day. You know, I often think I should be a better person thing, but I was on a film group, and there was a guy. I think it was about Zack Snyder's.
The 4-hour epic, yeah.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. But this one guy who, by his name, by his profile picture, and by the word that had got chosen, he meant to say forgettable, but what he typed was forgotten, right? And I think pretty much everybody on that thread knew that with his name, he was, you know, from like Pakistan or somewhere like that. And he'd just chosen the wrong word.
Easily done.
This guy chose to jump in on it and say, don't you mean forgettable? Like really snappily. And that really sort of got my goat up. And I know that it's because I was illiterate. I have struggled with dyslexia my whole life. Everything that I've learned in my adulthood. But I hate the word grammar Nazi, but I hate people that correct other people, especially when it's quite obvious that it's not doing anybody any harm. So I had a go, you know, saying, well, you know, how dare you? You know, it's very obvious that this guy, English is his second language, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy jumped on and went, well, thank you for jumping in for me. You know, how am I going to learn unless people tell me? And then it's like, and then the guy that I'd told off reported my post. You know, it's like, what
is it worth it?
Is it? Yeah, was it worth it? You know, I felt like I was being the, you know, social warrior when the guy actually was willing to learn, and I was like, well, you know, I wrote this well-informed article, you know, about that, you know, this guy, it's down to education, but you pulling it up, it's down to ignorance. And yeah, at the end of the day, who did it? What did it achieve? But apart from me losing 15 minutes in trying to write this status and then
like
getting shut down because you wanted to learn.
I just thought of something then. Just a fleeting thought crossed my mind, something I was thinking of earlier on regarding conflict. If it comes back to me, I'll tell you. It's that assumption that we actually kind of make but until we and never assume, until we actually dig down into the reality of what's actually going on, we never really know what is going on for the other person. But we make too many, and you did the noble warrior bit there. And you compared education to ignorance, and I bet produced a brilliant argument.
Yeah.
That just wasn't needed, because and I see it all I see it all the time. And there is that. I've recently had a mediation to resolve that has literally been about somebody else jumping in on somebody else's behalf. And the person said, I don't even understand, what we didn't affect this person at all, but they felt that it was good to jump in. And when I actually asked the person, what made you do this? And what is it? And well, they nearly defended. Oh, they were this, they were that, they were that. And I said, but it's not, they weren't doing anything wrong. And you've jumped in and you've ended up in trouble. Do you think this was, yes, it was the right thing to do. They had to be defended. And I couldn't actually go into the details of it, but it was something what they did was pretty trivial, but somebody else jumped in and defended, and it resulted in police action. So like I say, it's too easy. It is just too flipping easy to do it. Let it go, mate. It's the only thing.
I think it's stubbornness that stops us letting go at times. There is something I did want to sort of just touch on, and that is the importance of self-conflict.
Yeah.
And when I was having not my last breakdown, the one before the proverbial really hit the fan, and I just wanted people to acknowledge the fact that I was hurting, not the reason that I was hurting, and not the circumstances around it. I just wanted people to acknowledge the fact that I was hurting mentally. And I just wanted them to understand that. And the fact that the people around me that, the friends and family and stuff like that couldn't do that, that caused conflict within myself. And that's when it started to antagonize, and I started getting worse because people weren't, validating my thought process, validating my pain, that I thought that they were intentionally causing conflict, when actually it's not them causing the conflict, it's myself that is causing the conflict, and then that's aggravating. I think that often when we are in that sort of space, you'll know yourself that there are some people that you just really can't talk to in certain situations because their head is just, you don't ask a bull that is charging how he's feeling, because he's just going to carry on charging anyway. Quite. But I want people to know that, because I know there are more people that feel this, and actually that wanting your pain validated is an important thing in recovery. You can validate your own pain, but sometimes you want the people that you love, the people that you respect, to validate your pain, and when they don't do that, that causes internal conflict. And I want people to know that because we don't always understand that is a normal thing, that is a normal process. When we are in that, I've learned that in in recovery, and some of the some of the research that I've done, and some of the wisdom that people have given me. But not everybody has access to that wisdom. It is sometimes down to validating. It's a normal response.
Yeah.
It's
You're seeking to be understood.
Yeah, and I think that's what we all need sometimes, but we often don't understand how we're feeling.
Sometimes, Jack, as good as it gets, is the only power you ever have is, no matter what's happening in the world, you decide what it means to you, and you decide how you're going to respond. That's it. That's as good as it gets. You can't control a single thing that goes on in the world. You can't control what goes on in other people's minds, but my God, you've got the supreme opportunity to decide, and this was a decision you made years ago and changed. Whatever is happening, if something happened now that was dramatically awful on the other side of that door, I've got an instant response to decide how to respond to it. I just thought, what does this mean to me right now? And I can choose how I wish to respond to it. When we look for validation, when we look for other people's understanding, we're often not rewarded. We don't get it because people won't know immediately what it is. Like you say, we've not all got access to that. But you can decide, it's like, okay, this guy, this is what I want. I'm not getting it. And they don't know that. And maybe they're not even capable of giving that. Maybe they're not even capable of giving that. So I can just get angry and angry and angrier about what somebody else is not capable of doing that would help me. Or you can just understand that sometimes I will come away from something that's been very tense, very long, and I feel I've got nowhere today. I think I've got absolutely nothing. Not everyone is always in that place where they've got the capability to rationally think and move forwards, and we won't always get what we want from other people, but you can always get what you want from yourself. You can always get that 100%. It's the only power you've got, but it's a brilliant power. It's an amazing one. It's an amazing power for you to actually think, do you know, that's going to mean something different to me. And this is what I'm going to do today instead. I'm going to scroll on by and I'm going to let them get on with it because I've just had a brilliant idea for a new article, a new blog. Someone's on the phone who's really interested, and I can get him into the old accidental journalist ShedX hut, and we can have a chat. It's where you choose to put your focus in life. It's what you choose to do. It's somebody said to me today, I told you the guy, we did some work around his OCD. I went, you get more of what you focus on. He went, I haven't focused on my OCD this week. I went, yeah, I know you focused on having a strong mind. And he went, I haven't been wiping door handles. He went, I haven't been wearing gloves. He went, I forgot to do it. I went, yeah, because you've got something different going on in that mind. And although that may have been something you felt you needed, that validation, you're going to wait a long time for it.
Yeah, I mean,
and in the meantime, you're just going to get upset.
It's that bit from As Good as You Get, Jack Nicholson film, where he's got really terrible OCD. He has to do so many things and wash his hands, and he has to sit at the same table in the same restaurant, have the same waitress every day, and he can't carry on with his day unless everything goes to plan. But we know that everything doesn't go to plan. And then he ends up, he had this intolerance for his gay neighbor, and then he ends up taking his gay neighbor back home because his neighbor was beaten.
Yeah.
And there's that where she says, why are you doing this? You're not particularly a nice person. Why are you doing this? And then he said, there's this pill. He says that if you take it, things will start getting better and better. 9 times out of 10, you'll get better. And he says, I'd never taken it. Then I met you. That was it. She said, pay me a compliment. He said, then I met you. And he said, I started taking it. The day that I met you, I started taking that tablet. He said, so the biggest compliment is you make me want to be a better man. Classic line. And I think that's it. I think because he focused his attention on something rather than self, then he identified actually the problem that he had with self, and then started doing something about it. So it's, it is that where there is action, there's equal and opposite reaction. Whatever we do, there's consequences, both good and bad. These things happen.
It is about being a better person, Jack. Ultimately, what I look for eventually is when people come out of conflict is not only can you resolve your issues with someone else, resolve your issues with yourself, you actually learn the next time that there's a better way. It's a bizarre thing for me to say, but I will say it. And a lot of people don't like this, but I still stand by it. What we actually need is more conflict. And by that, I don't mean more violence or more aggression or more abuse or anything like that. I mean more debate, more that bring our problems to the surface and we look at them and we discuss them. It's when we bury them and it just erupts into a huge fireball or some terrible outbreak of violence because we haven't debated, we haven't gone into, it. Conflict on its best day can actually be rather marvelous. And you can sit in a room with two people who will really bring it to the table, which is what you want them to do, and then get somewhere. So a lot of the time I'll always say, there's a difference between conflict and violence. Don't mistake the two. You can have a good verbal banter and a good berate, and I've seen it happen at tables, and it clears the air and it brings it out of the way. So never be afraid to rush towards it.
No, I mean, I'm all for freedom of speech and freedom of belief and freedom of thought. And, it's a big sort of thing these days. As people are becoming more psychologically and spiritually aware, of things that, especially my generation, our generation to this generation, the core beliefs are different, that, and I think it's easier to get into, it was all right when I was a kid. It's really easy to say that.
Yeah.
But actually, some of these things are. I was saying this to Jeffrey Holland the other day. Some of these things can be sort of aggravating, and some of the things that we thought and that we said back in our days can be different. Are not tolerated these days. I was talking to my wife about it earlier on as well. It's not tolerated these days for good reason. you know, but I'm a person that believes, because I wasn't always able to put my own thoughts across, because I wasn't always able to use words, because I wasn't always able to speak my mind, or I didn't feel able to do that. I can understand that actually freedom of speech and freedom of thought and freedom of thinking and freedom of expression, these are all things that we need.
Yeah.
So if there are people out there that that are racist, it is their right. We have to accept that it is their right to think and believe that way, but it's also my right to tackle that. It's the right to reply.
Yeah.
I hate when people use the word snowflake. I don't like that word. I think it's toxic. Because it breeds intolerance, and intolerance is one of the biggest things that causes conflict. And the biggest one at the moment seems to be the cancellation of Pepe Le Pew from the new Space Jam movie. They pulled him because he is deemed a stereotype, because of the way that you remember the Pepe Le Pew cartoons. The black cat got covered in white paint, he mistook it for a skunk, and then got heavy-handed and tried to imprint himself on and push himself onto that other thing. I can see that, but I also don't like censorship or cancel culture, because I think it's dangerous. Because then you can't give someone a freedom of speech by taking the freedom of speech of someone else and the freedom of expression from someone else. So, I think that causes more conflict, and there's more and more of that going on as of late. And cancel culture is happening, and it's causing sort of intolerance and conflict everywhere, not just on Facebook, everywhere. People are talking about it everywhere. And there always has been, and there always will be conflict. And I think that sometimes, like you said, we need to realize that actually, although we look at conflict as a bad thing, sometimes conflict, it needs to happen. Because if it doesn't, we might not be able to get our point across, or we might not have that platform. This platform was born from the need for me to not just build on my own self-confidence, but give other people a platform to get their voices heard, because they didn't feel like they had that soapbox, or that opportunity.
At the moment, Jack, I'm watching, and I would recommend it to anyone, the entire series of The West Wing. Watched it years ago, loved it. It's all about the American. It's like, yeah, it's a bit ideological. It's a bit like, these would be the ideal people you would want in the White House. It's lovely, brilliant, written by Aaron Sorkin, my favorite writer. 7-series box set, Channel 4, totally amazing. Watching The West Wing, and they're always talking about they want their legacy to be raising the level of debate. And there's a brilliant episode I just watched where they are, and West Wing was years ago now, and what they're debating with the military is gay and homosexuality in the military. And they're trying to debate it. They're trying to negotiate. They're trying to talk about, what it would mean. And you've got some very old school, hard-edged military guys saying, this is wrong and this is why it can't exist. And suddenly the high-ranking admiral walks into the room, and he's played by John Amos, who is black, and they all stand up the minute he walks in the room, and they won't even talk until he gives them permission. He is that high up, and they draw him into the talk, and he says, to be honest, he says, I don't think it will change anything. And he said, but just know this. He said, you're talking about homosexuality, gay people being subversive. It would undermine the military operation if everyone was integrated into the military. And he went, 50 years ago, they said the same thing about me. And now he was like an admiral or a general. And I thought, yeah, it's sometimes having that conversation about how we improve and how we respect people by their gender or their creed or their is difficult, and it brings us into conflict. But if we don't have the debate, if we don't have the conflict, then how are we ever meant to get to the core of it and resolve it? I do believe the world gets better eventually. I'm a very positive person and believe that, the more we talk, the more we kind of understand things, and the more we kind of not just merge or blur into one, but the more understanding we develop about other people, the better. But it's like learning to walk. You fall down a few times and you get up and you fall down. You don't just give up because it's difficult. Yeah, it's meant to be difficult. It's meant to be hard. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be difficult. It's why you do it. But eventually you get there and you generate a better way of life, and more people have liberties and freedoms. And I think that's the very best. And that's why I say we need more conflict, not more violence or abuse or anything like that. But we need to have that, call it something else, call it debate. And that's where we eventually we get better. I've been watching too much West Wing recently, Jack.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it's a learning curve, isn't it? And I think that if you look a certain way, I'm focusing on for the first time in a long time, I'm focusing on future. I don't like to do that so much because I like to live within the day. The 12-step life has been a part of my life for such a long time. I walked into my first meeting in 1992. Yeah, 1991, 1992. I wasn't very old. I was 13, 14. And, I've been in and out of those rooms, in and out of that program my whole life. And, I've had extended lengths of sobriety. I had the longest that I had was 12 years. And then I ended up on my ass, homeless, and everybody knows the rest. Anybody that follows me knows the rest. And it was for the first time in such a long time. I love doing these things, and I like to think that people like to watch them. I was talking to a friend of mine from church the other day, and said that he does not able to watch them live, but likes to catch up with them when he can. And then it was the morning of the Jeffrey Holland interview, actually. And then he said, what you doing? What you're doing after that? What's your next one after that? And it's when I was planning the one with Stephen Simmons about talking about suicide, which we're going to do hopefully next week, and suicide prevention. And he went, you really don't hold back, do you? And I'm like, well, no. And I really shouldn't, because there's so many podcasters out there and there's so many people that have got so much to say, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Facebook is brilliant for that. As we discussed earlier, YouTube is good for that. And there's so many people that have, talked about their lives and they're educating people, and that is just, it's absolutely fantastic. But, I love a good interview. I get a lot of people from the true crime genre. It's great. I could talk about it all day, every day. But we need to be focusing on things like this.
Yeah. We
need to be focusing on things like conflict. We need to be focusing on things like suicide prevention, mental health, because, especially, our mental health in all, but, mental health in men as well, because, it's the highest suicide. We're in suicide. I think we're in Suicide Prevention Month. And there are people talking about their, their experiences with it. People like Peter Blexley, who got very open about it on his Facebook. I like to be as open as I can. There's a woman that I'm talking to at the minute that I'm trying through one of the groups that I'm trying to get on. She is just a force of inspiration. She's got a reconstructed jaw, no teeth, because she tried to blow her brains out, and now she's talking about suicide prevention and sobriety, because she couldn't see past her addiction. And I think that when other people can't see past your addiction, because there are people out there that can't do that.
No, they can't.
You, on a personal level, find it difficult to see past your addiction. So we need people that have been through it. And I'm not saying it's necessarily me, but we need people like you that have seen it from one side, and we need people, like I get on people like Ray Bishop, Joey Barnett, talk, James Jeffries, that will talk about things that they've been through on a personal level as a man, been through domestic abuse, been through suicide, been through the stigma of prison, talk about abuse and talk about it openly, because there aren't people that are doing that. And we need people to step up and to be able to put that across. And I realize that that's going to cause conflict. And I realize that there are going to be people that follow me on this page that, I know people that are losing 5-10 people a day. I realize that's going to happen. It's inevitable, because you're always going to do something that is going to trigger someone, that's going to piss someone off, that's going to, there's always going to be that internal conflict that other people are going to feel. And, you're going to doubt yourself, and you're going to think, well, should I have really said that, But these things need to be tackled. People are not doing it. And, this is why this was born. It's why Shed X was born when we first started, because I had a shed. Most of the people that wanted, that were going to come on have been turned down for the TEDx talks. It was a bit of a dig.
Me both, brother.
it was a bit funny, but that's how it was born. But people have so much wisdom to share, and we need to share this wisdom. If just one person watching tonight is affected by this, bang on. Brilliant. I've done my job, you've done your job. That's brilliant. I'd like to think there's more, but if just one person, sees anything in this and identifies with it, and then, sees that need, that want to change something about their routine, about their life, then that's absolutely fantastic. That's when we need to be looking at the positives of conflicts.
Absolutely. Just always remember, Jack, I mean, it's called conflict for a reason, but there are some brilliantly principled ways of absolutely negotiating conflict. We see some marvelous examples of it in life and in society, that if we just separate the people from the problem, look for interests, look for what the real interests are that lie beneath. People always have a position, get people out of the position, look for interests, generate options, and go for a bit of wise agreement. We'll always find a bit of a, you and I, we can agree on the price of a second-hand car. We can go on to the AA website or whatever it is, and we can go, that's the average price of a second-hand Ford that's 5 years old. A bit of wise agreement. Get yourself out those bunkers and talk. Have the debate. Be passionate about it. But it doesn't have to end in bloodshed. It doesn't have to end. There's always something else that's lying beneath it, and there's always a better way to actually deal with it. I know this because this is my world, Jack. This is my life. And if I had hair, I would sometimes tear it out of just the sheer of what it is that people do. But all the successful mediations I do, all the successful negotiations, you absolutely realize that there is a better way to resolve things. There is a much easier way to resolve, be it from the most extreme level of a hostage situation or a kidnap and ransom situation, right over here with, the neighbor's dog makes too much noise. They're all relevant. They're all relevant to that person who is taking part in that particular scenario. And there's always a better way to resolve it. Just keep talking, mate, and keep listening.
That's it, innit? At the end of the day, simple.
Yeah.
I think we tend to overcomplicate things, but at the end of the day, sometimes we just need to talk it through, and there is that cathartic nature. Because
all it needs to be done.
Yeah, because sometimes you just need to be listened to, and sometimes you just need to be talked to. And that's that. I don't want to overuse the word reciprocous.
Yeah.
Thing. So yeah. I want to say, if anybody's been affected by anything that we've spoken about tonight, please feel free. Please do. Don't suffer in silence. Drop us a message on the page. If you really need any advice from Jason, I am sure he will reciprocate.
I'll put the links down there. There's advice. I'll put free information. I'll put free advice down there. I always give people free consultations, Jack. I always give people free consultation calls. I'm known for that. If you can help people in life and give a bit of free advice, people know it's what I do for a living. I charge money for it. People can hire me to work privately, but I do also give free advice, Jack, because that just costs nothing, mate. And sometimes you just make the world a bit of a better place. So yeah, always happy to answer a question.
Yeah, I'm always happy to push questions towards you. If you've got anything that is really sort of troubling you and burning, then you please drop the Accidental Journalist page a message, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. And I will do my best to help you sort out what you need to sort out. Next week is actor and filmmaker Velton Lishka. I've known Velton for quite a while now. I had the extreme pleasure of meeting him a few years ago when he was on holiday and he came to visit me in my hometown. And he's been very supportive of my ventures, and he's gone from suffering from mental health issues and drinking to making some absolutely fantastic films, into acting, producing. He's made some of the most prolific films that you probably could ever imagine. I'm one of it. I'll probably sound sort of a bit fanboy here, but he is a good mate, and I do love his work, because he's just someone that I absolutely look up to and aspire to just be half as good in my own sort of ventures when it comes to film. So yeah, it's been nice to get Velton on next week and chat about how he did that, and some of the problems that he's faced, and how he's gone and done that to be a multi-award winning actor, writer, director. So yeah, so that's next Tuesday at the same time. I'm going to say good night to everybody now. I'm going to cut the feed, and I shall see you next week as always. As I said at the start, thank you to my sponsors, Armour Scaffolding and No Means City Clothing. They help me to get my stuff across. So I'm extremely grateful to them. So yeah, I shall see you all next week. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Any questions, drop them down here. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Jack. Bye-bye, mate.